Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a new edition of the Daily Debate. We've been talking and focusing on the development taking place in Upper Egypt. We've been talking about the developments taking place within all the national mega projects all over the country. And tonight we're going to be focusing on the sustainable development taking place in the Sinai Peninsula. But before we start focusing on the Sinai Peninsula, let's check out some of the main stories making the news today. We'll start off with within the keenness, of the framework of the government to upgrade the transportation system and the gradual transfer of clean energy. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi inspected a number of versatile vehicles which operate with natural gas and electricity on Tuesday. President al-Sisi's inspection listened to a detailed explanation of the capabilities of those vehicles and the fields they can be used at. The head of state also inspected a vehicle model dedicated for people with special needs working with natural gas. Accompanying the president during the inspection was Minister of Transportation Kamel al-Wazir and General Kamel Wafi, the head of the administration of the Armed Forces Vehicles Administration. Also today, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli witnessed the inauguration of the new headquarters of the Cairo Security Directorate in New Cairo. Now, Madbouli described the new headquarters as a security edifice that boosts the state's capabilities in spreading a comprehensive cover across the capital to serve citizens and offer many services with the latest technological systems. The Prime Minister was accompanied by Interior Minister Mahmoud Tawfiq and Cairo Governor Khalid Abdel Al. The committee tasked with regulating churches' status, headed by Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli, approved the legislation of 141 churches and subsidiary buildings, bringing the total number of legalized churches and buildings to 2,162. During the meeting, Madbouli said the Civil Protection Authority would coordinate with churches to facilitate the application of civil protection standards as soon as possible. The meeting reviewed procedures being carried out by churches and buildings to abide by the requirements of civil protection. Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli praised the great role of Dar al-Ifta in preserving the security and stability of societies and achieving the Egyptian leadership in the field of fatwa at home and abroad. Madbouli also hailed the remarkable development in the digital transformation within the Egyptian Dar al-Ifta, which helps to deliver messages everywhere. The Prime Minister's remarks came during his meeting with Mufti of the Republic, head of the General Secretariat of the Role of Fatwa Bodies Worldwide, Dr. Shawi Allam, which centered on the future vision of Dar al-Ifta and its achievements last year. Allam stressed on the role of the fatwa in maintaining the security and stability of societies, adding that Dar al-Ifta realized the danger of extremism early and established the Observatory of Takfiri Fatwas and Extremist Opinions in 2014, which works around the clock to monitor and analyze all published extremist fatwas and publications and works to dismantle them. And Grand Imam of Al-Azhar, Dr. Ahmed Al-Taib, paid a visit to St. Mark Cathedral in Abbasiyah to congratulate Pope Tawadros II of Alexandria and Patriarch of St. Mark's Sees on Christmas on Tuesday. During the visit, Al-Taib stressed that divine revelations share common morals, including peace and brotherhood. For his part, Pope Tawadros II expressed his happiness for renewing the friendship and brotherly ties between Muslims and Christians and uniting within the national fabric at such occasions. Also on Tuesday, Grand Mufti of Egypt, Dr. Shawi Allam, congratulated Pope Tawadros. During his visit to the papal headquarters in Abbasiyah, he said the Egyptian experiment highlights the ability to achieve coexistence. Meanwhile, the Armed Forces General Command congratulated Pope Tawadros II and Christian Army personnel on the occasion. Also, Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli sent a cable of greetings to Pope Tawadros II, expressing his best regards to the Pontiff, wishing him and all Christians a very Merry Christmas. Meanwhile, the Armed Forces leadership offered congratulations to Pope Tawadros, and Minister of Interior, Major General Mahmoud Tawfiq, also congratulated him, hailing the strong ties joining and binding the Egyptian people in confronting any obstacles. These were the main stories making the news today, and before we start discussing our topic for tonight, let's check out this report regarding the developments taking place in Sinai, really promising a bright future.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi said the development of the Sinai Peninsula, which started in 2014, will continue until 2022, and pointed out the cost of the development of the peninsula will reach 275 billion Egyptian pounds, which will require the solidarity of all Egyptians. President el-Sisi has appealed to all citizens and businessmen of Egypt to donate to the Tahya Masra Fund, or Long Live Egypt Fund, to help raise finance and development of Sinai. Egypt has implemented a number of mega and national projects in Sinai to benefit from its wealth through a political vision to establish mega development projects in all fields to serve the good of Egyptians. Several projects were carried out there, such as the tunnel system, which is the best in the history of Egypt. Also, a series of floating bridges have been constructed to serve vital commercial residential areas between east and west. As roads are the foundation stone of the new urban communities, Egypt has constructed 26 roads with lengths of up to 2,022 kilometers, including the Shahid Ahmed Hamdi Tunnel and the Middle Ring Road in the Red Sea resort of Sharm el-Sheikh. Residential cities and Bedouin communities were also established with latest technologies, such as the new Ismailia city and Ras Sidra town. Many schools and Azhar institutes were also built in addition to improving the current schools. Meanwhile, Al-Bardawel International Airport, which was developed for civil purposes, while the foundation stone for new central hospitals have also been laid, upgrading the efficiency of existing hospitals, ambulances and health units, and providing a large number of modern medical devices. Also, many seawater desalination plants and wells have been established, including a Tor seawater desalination plant. These projects have all helped in the reclamation and cultivation of land. The government has allocated 6.8 billion Egyptian pounds to Sinai's development in the fiscal year 2020-2021, a plan focusing on bolstering the peninsula's economic and social advancement and stability.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and joining us here tonight in the studio to shed more light on the Sinai Peninsula, we're joined by Dr. Ibrahim Ghazawy, the Professor of International Relations. Dr. Ghazawy, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Doctor, now, the development in the Sinai Peninsula has been one of the top priorities for the Egyptian government, even since 2014. Now, only last year, Egypt has spent £14.1 billion on the development for the Sinai Peninsula, North Sinai, South Sinai and Central Sinai. Now, to what extent has the development plan in Sinai, has it been successful so far?
Well, let me start with focusing on the fact that developing Sinai is not a luxury for Egypt. Mm-hmm. It's a must, indeed. If we talk about national security considerations, this is one side. From the other side, even if we talk about economy itself, so yes, Sinai is or should be on top of our priorities when it comes to development. And as you mentioned, in the last year, tens of billions of Egyptian pounds have been spent. Mm-hmm. And since 2014, I have to tell you that the money allocated or the funds allocated to developing Sinai is historically the greatest. We talk about some 625 billion Egyptian pound. So far, what has been done is impressive in terms of the comparison between, when we consider the relatively short time that have been spent on this project in the last 7 years, I would say, and the tens of centuries before that. The movement has been so impressive and so fast, indeed, mm-hmm. in the last 7 years, which is really going with the logic also. I mean, we don't have, as I said at the beginning, it's not luxury for us. We are working under pressure, not only economically, but also when it comes to securing Sinai. So one of the most important considerations of security in Sinai is development and make it accessible to normal people to live there. So creating a stable community there, sustainable life there for civilians to have life there, not temporary, but stable residential areas, industrial areas, investment areas. All of this sorts of development have been already underway in the last 7 years. And they address both the national security needs and also economic needs. Economically, I have to say that it has been historically a mistake for Egyptian governments not to pay such attention to this dear part of Egypt.
Yes.
Simply because it's in terms of economy, it's a great addition to the potentials of Egyptian economy. But unfortunately, it wasn't utilized.
Yes.
In the last years, a lot of strenuous efforts have been exerted to deepen the fact that Sinai is rich of raw materials, is rich of agricultural areas, when we talk about land reclamation, and also has a lot of potentials as residential areas also. And we have to agree on the fact that unless you have stable living communities there, you will not have development.
Yes. Well, Dr. Ghazawy, as you've mentioned, there's the national security part of it and there's the economic aspect of it as well. Now, we start off with the national security part, which is basically the foundation for any sort of development or progress taking place on the peninsula. Now, Egypt has gone through its own war on terrorism and extremism in the peninsula, and at some point it seemed it was a great challenge for the Egyptian armed forces and the Egyptian government.
Yeah.
But now it seems that it's almost 100% done. Now, not only that, but also we're working and financing the rebuilding process within the Gaza Strip with $500 million. Now, how successful has the country and the army been in laying the foundation, as you've mentioned, and securing a stable and secure environment to allow not just having developments there and building factories and roads, but actually, as you've mentioned, having residential complexes and areas and for Egyptians to live there?
Well, actually, I would say that we have gone probably halfway through to the ultimate goal of sustainable development there. When I talk about the infrastructure, it was a must to start with. When we talk about over 2,400 road kilometers of roads, this is a real achievement. Has never been like that before. Only in Sinai. I'm not talking about the whole, the whole country. I'm talking only in Sinai. Why I'm talking about infrastructures? Because infrastructures is a must. You cannot have development anywhere, whether in Egypt or any other country in the world, if you don't have sufficient fund to construct and build real infrastructure. Then you cannot talk about real development. So the starting point in Sinai was reconstructing and reshaping the infrastructure map in Sinai. It's not only roads, it's also utilities, facilities like drinking water, like electricity, communication, industrial zones with whatever they need from infrastructure and other services. Of course, this all adds to the fact that Sinai now is Egyptian 100%. Why I'm talking like that? Was it not Egyptian 100%? No, it wasn't like that. What I mean is, if we remember how many illegal tunnels that have been demolished by the army during Al-Amaliyah Shamila Sinai 2018, we talk about more than 3,500 tunnels, illegal passages and tunnels were demolished by the army and the police. And this was a continuous thorn in the neck of Egypt, I would say, because simply you cannot have a say over what is going on in Sinai, because also of the rarity of population there, the rigidity of the geographic nature or terrain in Sinai. That has given access, of course, open access for terrorists for long years. Before Egypt, took notice of what is going on there. After 30 June revolution, there was a massive confrontation with terrorism, whether in Cairo or in normal Egyptian geography, or especially in Sinai. Sinai has always been, before that time, we all know about the peace agreement with Israel. According to the peace agreement and convention, Sinai was not allowed for the Egyptian army to be there. And that has limited the influence of Egyptian presence, sovereign presence, I would say, on the Sinai land. But after 30 June revolution, the situation changed diametrically, because we were faced by a very destabilizing factor, which is terrorism. And terrorism at that time was not coming through airports or legal entrances of Egypt, but it was coming through illegal access to Egypt. And one of the most dangerous and threatening accesses to Egyptian land was Sinai. Was the border with the Gaza Strip and that big part there, and especially talking about tunnels. So some of these tunnels were accommodating very large transportation means, like trucks and big lorries and that kind of stuff. But as a government, we didn't know what is going on there. At the time when it came that we have to face this, that was the real confrontation to impose forcibly the full control of Egypt's sovereignty and Egypt's legitimate influence over Sinai land. And that was indeed a step that were irreplaceable by any other step. You don't have any other alternatives. So the presence of the army there, and strong presence of our army there, supported by the police presence, and this continuous operation to liquidate the pockets of terrorists there, of course have resulted on a very positive change in terms of how this region is stabilized in terms of security, and also as a very important step to make investment there, to make stable life there, to make sustainable development there. As we usually say, if you don't have security on any society, you cannot talk about economic development or any sort of development indeed. So without security, we wouldn't be able to strike this enormous process of development in Sinai. And I have to say that we have gone a long way in that direction. Of course, we talk about today a very different situation than 3 or 4 years ago. Even talk about statistically, the figures are giving also positive indicators that the overall revenues of economic reform programs are very much promising that we are in the right direction, which is really good. I have to say.
Sir, as you've mentioned, the infrastructure work is of the essence for the development within the peninsula, and you've mentioned the water desalination plants, the the health sector as well, with the hospitals being established there, including the St. Catherine Hospital. Also, the industrial zones that should be operated, and free industrial zones as well along the Suez Canal and the banks of the canal. Now, and even the educational sector and the museums, because the first thing everyone thinks of whenever we're talking about Sinai is the tourism. That also has been developed. Now, with all these sort of utilities and facilities and infrastructure, all these things being developed over the past few years, what did it also provide for the residents of Sinai? The job opportunities there, the education there. Now everybody's got a chance to work. And I mean, we have 17 clusters within the Sinai Peninsula, 10 in the north and 7 in the south. And they're mainly also agricultural land. Now, do you think that now the agricultural sector as well will be one of the great sectors that will be flourishing within the new development projects taking place in Sinai?
Well, I do believe that agriculture should be always our top priority in Egypt. And I was so pleased with President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's directions to the government in the last couple of weeks that we should pay attention more and more to agriculture. We should not forget historically that Egypt has always been historically strong when Egypt was a flourishing agricultural community. We should not forget that fact. And was also one of the colossal mistakes of our recent history after 1952 revolution was that probably the attention was given to the agricultural sector in Egypt was not strong enough to keep the tempo of having agricultural country in Egypt. This is one of the most important points of strength in any society in the world, to have strong agriculture, to have strong agricultural products. It means that you have self-sufficiency, you can cover your own needs as a society, and you can use the extra production for exports. And Egypt has always, in long time historically, a basket for food for the world. That's why we appreciate very much this, consecutive successful steps to make agriculture again on top of our priorities. I have also to tell that probably we are blessed in Egypt to have such a variety of potentials in our economy. We talk about tourism.
Yes.
It's not only agriculture. We have a very rich assets when it comes to tourism, and also we are working on it. We in Sinai also specifically, tourism there in Sinai is another mega projects going underway there in Sinai. You mentioned education, Gamat or University of King Salman and other universities underway. I have to tell that the most successful of any plan for development is the plan that is based on parallel lines development. You are not only focusing on agriculture or in industry or investment, but you are focusing on all the lines, all the threads of life together. Education, culture, agriculture, economy, healthcare, infrastructure, industry, manufacturing, raw materials and mining, especially in Sinai. And if you consider that Sinai is really a place of potentials for all such things all together, it gives you an indication that how it is promising for Egyptians to have Sinai fully developed in the near future, inshallah. That's why I always say that the parallel lines plan for development is the most important, because as I said, you are not focusing only in one facet of life or activities like agriculture or tourism or whatever, but you are focusing on all the lines together. That's why you are moved simultaneously. You are progressing simultaneously in all sector because we have also to admit that we are in real need in all these fields to work together. I mean, you don't have this luxury of, you know, working on each line together for a couple of years and come back to the other line and start again. We don't have that time. Aspirations of Egyptians are so high in the sky. And we are in real need for such things to be focused on all together and to working on the ground all together. And what we see on the ground today is that we are doing this. Other thing, which is not less important than that consideration, is if we talk about fighting terrorism, development is the first successful army for any society to fight terrorism. You have to develop your society. And development is not only economy. You talk about education, you talk about health care, you talk about culture, you talk about societal development, you talk about human nature development, the personality of Egyptians that we have to work on again. All of these threads have to be working together. And we talk about, for instance, which was also a point of repeated addressing from the president in several occasions, religious reshaping religious speech.
Yes, and speech.
Okay, which really we need. We need to focus on the how to accept others, how to reshape our societies in a way that, you know, everyone understand that we all have the same rights. We are equal in our society. There is no one better than the other. We all enjoy the same level of rights and the same level also of obligations in a society that recognize only the rule of law issues. We are all under the same umbrella of law. We hope that we all understand this issue. If we consider, which is very important to you know, shed the light more on this sensitive issue, if we look around us in the region, we'll find a lot of countries suffering from this issue, the sectarian clashes, the absence of this you know, harmony in the society. Luckily, in Egypt, we don't have that. We have, we Egyptians always, historically, we are living in such living conditions where everyone respects others. The Egyptian society has always been accommodating differences, not clashing with them, which is very good for us, and we can build on that. Yes, of course, there was some phases in our history where we had problems with that when terrorism waves, you know, ravaged some areas in Egypt. But that was luckily in very short times. And we get back to our taking off points of accepting others, living on the same ground of citizenship. Everyone is recognized as a dignified individual in his society without any, you know, discrimination based on religion, based on color, based on social layer or whatever. Which is a good base for development, I have to say.
Well, Doctor, I'm going to get back to that point, but before we start talking about the social sort of development and societal development taking place there, I don't want to leave the infrastructure and the development taking place within the Sinai Peninsula without shedding light on the 4 tunnels that have been dug under the canal connecting to other cities, Bursaid, Suez and Ismailia, and also 2 floating bridges. So the development taking place in Sinai is not only benefiting the Sinai Peninsula and the people of Sinai, but also benefiting the whole society, the whole country. How is this going to benefit it?
Well, that's a very important point, I have to say. You know, because materially, geographically, Sinai is disconnected in most of the part, you know, from the main Egyptian land. And through these tunnels under Suez Canal, that was a very good way to connect Sinai properly with the other part of Egypt, land and geography. And as you mentioned, we have 4 tunnels, mega tunnels, under the Suez Canal in Port Said and in Ismailia and in Suez, adds to 2 floating bridges, which makes transportation much easier than it was before. We have to say that, although we knew that it's very important to have good communication and good transportation with Sinai, but historically we were not able to translate this into actions because of this, what I said, the disconnection, geographic disconnection between Sinai Peninsula and other Egyptian land, our main Egyptian land.
Yes.
Today, no, the situation changed positively and diametrically with this tunnels and also with the floating bridges. You can have this 24 hour and as say the 24/7, which is continuous mechanism of transportation going over hour and over the week and over month and over the year, which is a must for any development. And if we consider that there was sometimes in the near past where there was a lot of suffering from traffic congestion, from the trucks and even normal people movement from eastern side to western, or from Al-Qantara, Gharb, and Port Said and Suez, so going to the other side of Sinai. Because of this limited access or limited transportation passage, today the situation changed. You can have an open roads for transportation today. It means it's shortening the time spent on transportation, and time is money. It means also facilitating the process of commodities and goods transportation from and to Sinai, which makes it easier also when it comes to industrial activities and manufacturing in Sinai, because if we don't have this sort of channels of communication and transportation, you cannot have manufacturers, you cannot have industry. Otherwise, how can you transport this? How can you move goods and commodities? How can you move people themselves easily? So I think the situation today have developed largely in terms of facilitating this sort of development. Yes, I have also to admit that yes, there is still a long way for us, but we have gone the most important and necessary steps so far, which is paving the road for taking off. The infrastructure and the financial funds available, and the political will for development, and also the recognition of normal Egyptians that Sinai is a dear part of Egypt and deserve development as soon as possible because of its potential from one side, economically, and also because of security, national security consideration, which also a consideration that we have always to keep in our eyes. We cannot live without it.
Yes, definitely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, talking about the funds, the political will, let's check out this report regarding President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi inaugurating a lot of the national development projects in Sinai, and we'll be right back.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has inaugurated a number of national projects for the development of the Sinai Peninsula last September in the presence of Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli and several ministers and senior statesmen. President el-Sisi inaugurated a number of projects in the health and road sectors via video conference. He attended the inauguration of medical projects in the peninsula, including the St. Catherine Hospital, Roisat Medical Center, and other healthcare facilities. He also went on an inspection tour and had a photo op marking the opening of a Shahid Ahmed Hamdi tunnel, which connects Africa to Asia, in an event in Suez. The tunnel is considered the 5th tunnel built by Egypt in the last 2 years to connect Sinai to the two continents. In 2019, President al-Sisi inaugurated 4 tunnels linking Sinai to the mainland, 2 in Ismailia and 2 in Port Said. The Shahid Ahmed Hamdi Tunnel links the Nile Delta and Sinai Peninsula with the aim of facilitating movement of citizens and goods to and from the west of the canal. The new tunnel is expected to double investments and job opportunities in Sinai. The first Ahmed Hamdi Tunnel was built in 1981.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, continuing our discussion with Dr. Ghazawy. Now, Doctor, you've mentioned the cultural and societal development taking place in Sinai. That now the President has repeatedly mentioned the importance of the Bedouin community in the Sinai Peninsula and how they are part and parcel of the Egyptian society. They are Egyptians. There is no any sort of discrimination. He's been talking about that for the Nubian residents in Sinai and also the Nubian residents in Luxor and Aswan and yes. The Bedouins in Sinai. Yes. Now, and we've been seeing in Egypt's modern history post 2011 all the meetings and the meetings with the tribal leaders of Sinai and all the agreements that have been signed between them and the government, and how really this has been a cornerstone for the development, is really convincing and getting all the residents of Sinai Peninsula on the government's side. How much of an achievement has that been?
Well, I must say that the Bedouins, the original inhabitants of Sinai, historically were deprived of a lot of their rights. Yes. And that was a colossal mistake. Because it was not supposed to be that way. As you mentioned today, yes, they are given access to all their rights, which is their rights, as I say. It's not just a gift from the government. This is those people deserve rights, and they and the government today is trying their best to give the Bedouins, whether, as you mentioned, in Sinai or in our western border with Libya, in Marsa Matruh and that area, or in the south, the Nubians in Aswan and that part of Egypt. Yes, those people are Egyptians, and as I said, it was a mistake before that they were not treated equally. They were deprived of equal opportunities for jobs and representation in whether in government institutions or in parliament or whatever. Today the situation is different, and I think also there is a growing recognition, as you mentioned, that any development in these areas is based on those people there. They are the basis, and we have to accept also the fact that you can't have real development in these communities if the Sinai people, the original people there, are not integrated part of this development plan, which is really what the government do today. They are paying attention to what the local communities, what they are needs, and how the government would fulfill these needs on the ground. And even when we talk about, when we were talking before the break, when we were talking about terrorism fighting in Sinai, also fighting terrorism in Sinai, the Sinai inhabitants or community was also a core part of the confrontation.
Yes, definitely.
If we talk historically, during the times of war with Israel, also Sinai people were very important part of the confrontation process.
Yes.
So there was no real reason, for the government or consecutive governments historically to neglect the rights of those people. On the contrary, they were supposed to be given even extra care and extra attention because they are far from the center of the country. They are in the remote areas. They are in the outskirts of the country.
Yes.
And they are facing probably harsher living conditions when it comes to weather conditions there or the nature of the desert in these areas. And a lot of this, large swaths of these places are mountainous areas, and living there is not easy. But if you are given these communities who are living naturally in these places and inhabiting them and ready to be full citizens, doing their duties and constituting a base for development there, you have to build on them. You have to build on their presence. You have to deepen their sort of loyalty to the motherland, to the country in Egypt, which is the government is really doing now. And I have to say that it's one of the most important of the considerations of national security is to save and safeguard the presence, the peaceful and productive presence of these communities, whether in Sinai or Matruh in the western and eastern and western border of Egypt, or in the southern border of the Nubians and other Egyptians. As I usually say, they are at the end they are Egyptians. They are 100% Egyptians. They are not less than any other individual in Egypt. And it was a real mistake at some times that they were not looked at that way. Today there is sort of reconciliation with this situation, paying attention to their needs. And the president was in the southern part of Egypt, and he spent a week in Aswan, and it was a festival week full of celebrations. And we were so proud to see a lot of mega projects being inaugurated day after day, and we were so proud also to see the Nubians and Aswan inhabitants, the Luxor people, they were so pleased to see these projects opened and starting life for them.
Well, Doctor, we have 1 minute left, so this will be my last question now. Talking about the human development, talking about the rehabilitation and training facilities for the Nubian community within the Sinai Peninsula, but also do you feel that it could be happening that Egyptians from all over the country and residents in other Egyptian governorates moving to Sinai Peninsula, part of the residential development taking place there?
Well, that must be the goal, and I am quite sure that it is the goal of the government, simply because the total the number of inhabitants and the original people in Sinai, the whole peninsula is just probably less than 500,000, which is just a drop in the ocean. And the need for developing and inhabiting these areas there, you talk about at least 10 or 15 millions of inhabitants. So it's development not only for Sinai people, but for Egyptian people indeed, creating job opportunities, constructing new investment areas and educational facilities, infrastructure channels in different ways there, which is another window and take-off point to facilitate Egyptian life and taking from crowded communities to this, scarcely populated areas. You talk about from Cairo over 20 million inhabitants, and you talk about more or less empty places there. So there is real need to make this sort of balance, and I'm quite sure that the government is doing a great job in terms of making this sort of balance in terms, because it's also a core part of human development. We have to facilitate the living conditions for Egyptians. And one of the most important issues for that is setting good living areas. And Sinai is a place for good living areas in terms of environment, in terms of potentials.
Yes.
It's a virgin land there, and,
Yes.
and I hope that the future is very much, will be much better than it is
Yes.
today.
Well, as Dr. Ghazawy mentioned, the future in the Sinai Peninsula is very bright, and definitely a lot of good things are happening there. A lot of developmental things are taking place in one of the most beautiful places in Egypt. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. Before we go, I'd like to thank my very distinguished guest, Dr. Ibrahim Ghazawy, the Professor of International Relations. Dr. Ghazawy, it was a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much,
Pleasure.
sir. Pleasure, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, please stay tuned for more coming up on Night International. I'm Hani Saif. Thank you for joining us.